This morning we'll bring you the Prime Minister's Closing the Gap statement. That's live from Parliament at 11 a.m. The Prime Minister, meantime, is facing increasing pressure to release an internal report by his department into the sports grants scandal. Non-government senators will team up today in an attempt to force the Prime Minister's hand into publicly releasing the findings, which cost Bridget Mckenzie her job. Crossbench senators Jackie Lampy and Pauline Hanson have joined Labor and the Greens in co-signing the motion. If passed, it would stop the government from going about its business in the Senate. Senior government frontbencher Mathias Cormann will be stripped of his role in representing the Prime Minister in the upper house. Joining me now is Labor frontbencher and Senator Katy Gallagher. Thanks so much for your time. Why do you want to see the report? What's in it that you need to know?
Well, thanks for having me on, Laura. I think one of the most important roles the Senate plays is its role in review and inquiry and holding executive government to account. And obviously we've seen with the sports rorts saga an Auditor General's report. We've seen Bridget Mckenzie lose her job. We've only been given a few comments about the Gaetjens report, which was a report the Prime Minister commissioned after the Auditor General's report and following some comments around conflict of interest. But that report supposedly contradicts the Auditor General's report, and we think, the Senate thinks it's very important that we have access to that report so that we can consider all of the information that's been available to executive government as they've been dealing with the fallout from the sports rorts saga. We've asked for the report, we've asked through the order for production of documents, we've requested 4 or 5 or 6 times. The Senate has passed resolutions that require the government to table that document, and the government's refusing to do so. So we've sort of had our hands tied, and this is the Senate pushing back.
Do you think you have the numbers?
Well, the motion has been signed by every non-government party in the Senate, and if, based on that, the government doesn't have a majority of votes in the Senate, and with Centre Alliance, Jackie Lampy, One Nation, Labor and the Greens standing together, we can certainly show the government, because it's not necessarily just about this issue, it's also about how the government treats the Senate. And when the Senate asks for documents, it has powers to call for documents. We don't expect to be treated in the way the government's been treating us, which is essentially to come in and say, sorry, we're just not going to listen to you and we're not going to hand it over.
So it's an unusual move for you to strip Mathias Cormann of his role of representing the Prime Minister in the Senate. Have you ever done that before?
Look, I think in the past sanctions have been imposed at various times in the seeking of documents. I think this is probably a tougher sanction that the Senate is seeking, but in discussions with Crossbench and that we've had over the last few months, really, because it's really been about.
How long would it last, though? Would it be indefinite?
No, it's got a time limit for the 6th of March, and it would require that, it would mean that Senator Cormann couldn't represent the Prime Minister during question time or at estimates, until the report is tabled. And I guess, when you've got the head of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, former Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, contradicting and arguing with the Auditor General, it really is quite an important document to get to the bottom of.
Well, the argument is, though, that this is a cabinet document. Would Labor release a cabinet document if in government?
Well, there's certainly grounds to not release documents relating to Cabinet in confidence, and particularly when it relates to deliberations of Cabinet. And, I think every non-government senator respects that. But this report was commissioned outside of Cabinet. It's a standalone document. We have no interest in understanding the deliberations of Cabinet. We have not sought any information relating to that. We are simply asking for a report. And governments release... most government reports go to Cabinet. They're then released. I think just to say that this one, for some reason, can't be released for on very spurious grounds, then, the Senate needs to push back, because if we accept this, if we accept the government just telling us to get lost, essentially, then what next? And the Senate has a very important role to make sure that we hold the excesses of executive government to account, and that's what's happening today.
Well, Katy Gallagher, thanks so much for your time.